If Tommy Egan is as connected as he appears to be, this investigation can blow the roof off of the organizations that have had this city by the balls for years. And it could give us a straight line to the Mexican cartel.
In season 1 of Force, there was one man who was able to remain a ghost, but with law enforcement finding out the true identity of the man who caused so much chaos in Chicago, Tommy now finds himself with a task force on his trail.
Show up in my city selling a whole lot of drugs.
You gotta use that word allegedly.
But we all know Tommy from Power. He never shies away from the street, and we are going to see much of the same at some point in season 2, especially when he comes face to face with Stacey Marks. Now in today's video, we are going to be exploring how Tommy will have to navigate the streets by keeping his head on a constant swivel more than ever before. Law enforcement in Chicago seem like they want to do what New York couldn't. There's also a revolt in treason. They've just stolen Miguel Garcia's product, and Merkovich will no doubt come for the Crimson projects. So there's a lot for Tommy to deal with in season 2, and so the hunt for Tommy Egan has well and truly begun. Now after Tommy wasn't able to save Ghost at the end of Power, he left New York on his way to LA to work with Rodolfo, someone who he was introduced to through Jason Michich.
I don't work for nobody no more. I think I'm gonna stay here, build my own shit. I'm my own boss now.
Now the quick pit stop in Chicago did become a permanent residence, although it is yet to be seen whether he is going to be staying here for the long term. There's no way of telling whether he'll succeed in taking over Chicago either, whether he'd have to make a run for it, whether he'll go to LA, who knows. For the time being, he certainly has a lot of reasons to stay in Chicago. Now prior to his story beginning, he did come back to New York to handle some business with Tasha. That was after she name dropped him as the kingpin to the entire drug organization. After everything the St. Patrick's had been through and dealt with lies, betrayal and manipulation, Tommy had enough. He came back to settle an old score, something which I do believe he should have done following Lakeisha's death. Unfortunately for Tommy, in his way was Tariq St. Patrick, who would never let anything happen to his mother. But Tommy was a man on a mission.
I want all the smoke.
Now they eventually came to a mutual agreement where they would all get what they wanted. He convinced Tommy to fake his death, which would give him the freedom away from New York. Meanwhile, Tariq planned an escape for Tasha by sending her to Witsec, as he knew he couldn't trust Tommy to stick to his end of the deal. Tommy then left New York, and fast forward to season 1 of Force, he arrived in Chicago where he stayed true to his nature by creating chaos and mayhem in a new city. He made his mark by entering the drug trade by going toe-to-toe with the CBI and the Flynns. However, intertwined was law enforcement, who were keeping a close eye on the Flynn family, which is where Agent Vargas and Kayla snapped these particular images early in season 1. These were later brought to AUSA Stacey Marks' desk, where he was described as a ghost. From then, it was just a waiting game until Tommy's true identity was revealed. So fast forward to season 2 of Force. The early investigations from AUSA Stacey Marks' team was the Flynns had dug in after the shootout, with Vic and Claudia staying clear from their family residence. There was an internal war within the CBI, but their main focus was on this man. They had pictures, but they didn't have an identity. So the next step was to get the prints, but getting his prints wasn't easy. Tommy is a seasoned criminal. He's described as someone who has eyes at the back of his head, and that's because Tommy grew up with arguably the best. He was mentored by Breeze and Kanan. He learned a lot from Ghost and various other connects like Milan. So this Tommy Egan that we are seeing in Chicago may be true to his nature, but he is more strategic and he does know how to play law enforcement. But Stacey Marks does seem like she's on a mission. She wanted results, not excuses. Finally, they were able to put a name to the face. That was thanks to Agent Vargas and Kayla getting Tommy's fingerprints. Now the reason why New York weren't interested in Tommy Egan is because to them, they still consider him dead. The New York field office said it was impossible for him to be alive. They just brushed it off. Although with Tommy not having gone back to New York yet for Ghost Season 3, I did create a theory around Cooper Saxe still being alive at this moment in time in the Force timeline. So whether Cooper Saxe could have found out Tommy was alive, who knows, but I will link this video down below where I do go into detail in regards to the timeline and how it can potentially happen. But for law enforcement in Chicago, they want to do what New York couldn't. Slap the handcuffs on Tommy Egan and put him away for the rest of his life, along with the rest of the big players in Chicago and the cartel. Now it wasn't easy for Stacey Marks to get her task force. She has a checkered history with the CPD due to their past, and it took Lil K catching a little girl in the crossfire to get the go-ahead for this joint task force. So you see how one single action can have a ridiculously huge snowball effect. Chewie flipping to treason resulted in Tommy killing him. That resulted in retaliation from Lil K, who caught a little girl in a crossfire, which gave the ammunition law enforcement needed to get this task force off the ground. A huge snowball effect that really could have been avoided. But going forward, the formation of this task force really will give Tommy something else to think about, although he's no stranger to being targeted by law enforcement. However, the difference this time around is he has no Ghost and no Joe Proctor, who are often the brains and the protection from people like Angela Valdez, Cooper Saxe, and Blanca Rodriguez. But with law enforcement on the verge of forming this task force, there's going to be a tightened surveillance which will make it extremely challenging for Tommy and Diamond to run their operation. We're going to see Bobby trying to clean up the streets, with Tommy having to keep his head on a swivel at every single turn. With law enforcement cracking down on the streets, we're going to see pressure mounting for Tommy, which is the last thing he needed after setting off a chain reaction. Treason and Merkovich, who are direct rivals of Tommy, will no doubt try and capitalize, but with Stacey Marks eyeing her task force, this also spells bad news for the rest of the drug gangs. Blood on the streets, wars, and death really is bad for business, because at the end of the day, the end goal for each of these organizations is to make money. So law enforcement being all over the streets and on their trail will make it difficult. So I do think Tommy should have found another way to deal with Chewie. Diamond was right, they had to think about their move carefully because starting a war with treason at this moment in time is completely the wrong move, especially as his end goal is to be the Connect of Chicago. Although from Tommy's perspective, Chewie's disrespect had to be dealt with, and now so does Lil K's, because he went against direct orders given to him from Jannard. Now with Stacey Marks versus Tommy Egan, he's gonna have to play this game like a game of chess. Tommy's gonna have to adapt his tactics on the fly as and when law enforcement make their move. He's going to need to be 5 moves ahead at all times. He needs to come up with contingency plans. He needs people around him that he can trust, which I do think he has with Diamond. But one of the tactics that law enforcement always use is strong-arming foot soldiers. And the obvious choice at this moment in time is Lil K based on the trailer for episode 3. But with him going behind Jannard's back and shooting the little girl, I do think the writing is on the wall for him. So this is where I do want to bring it to this particular scene that we saw in the official trailer for season 2.
Linchpin to bringing down all of these gangs.
We've got Stacey Marks and Bobby DeFranco in conversation about how taking down Tommy Egan is the connection that will help them dismantle the entire drug trade in Chicago. But who do they have in the background? Now initially I did think this might have been Tommy himself, but the fact that we've already seen a teaser with Stacey Marks coming face to face with Tommy, it doesn't seem like she's got much evidence on him. It may not always be that way because at some point Tommy may make a mistake, but this Tommy is a little different to the one in power. He's more smarter and more strategic. He's learned from some of the best in the game, so it is going to be a bit of a tough chess game between Stacey Marks and Tommy Egan. But this looks like Vic in the background, so at some point Vic is going to do something to get himself pulled in other than the armed robbery we saw in episode 2. So my question is, if this is Vic in the background, will he talk? The other problem is Vic seems like he could be back working with the CBI at some point in the future, which was an offer Tommy put to him in episode 2. So a reckless Vic who's trying to dismantle Walter's operation from the inside may also prove to be an issue. So Tommy needs to keep his head on a swivel for Vic, law enforcement on his tail, he's facing threats from old enemies in the streets, all while trying to protect and shield his family from the drug game. Now we also have to factor in Bobby DeFranco, who's at street level, who knows how to use the street to his advantage. He's a big bonus for Stacey Marks. He seems like he knows how to get shit done, but will it be enough? At some point they're also going to be in conflict because it does seem like Stacey Marks will put a lot on the line to get what she wants. So can law enforcement in Chicago take that step New York couldn't? And could New York still even have a part to play? As I mentioned, the timeline aspect does make for an interesting theory around one particular character, Cooper Saxe.